about shaping the future of education, culture and media in Europe at a really important time, I think we'll all agree, with the sort of legislative and the terms and the mandates all changing. This event is a really good opportunity for us to take stock a bit about what's happened in the European Parliament and elsewhere in EU lawmaking, and to look a bit forward about what we want to do coming up, especially after next year's European Parliament elections. My name is Jack Parrock. I'm a Brussels-based news correspondent and presenter, mainly known for my work with Deutsche Welle, the German public broadcaster, and Euronews. And I'm really honoured to have been asked to come and host this event for the Socialists and Democrats group this afternoon. We've got a lot to get into. We've got 3 panels that are going to go into the separate subject areas: culture, education, and media. And we also have, well, we have a sort of very high-level set of MEPs who've been working on different topics from the S&D group. We also have some outside participants who are going to bring their knowledge and their understanding of where we are right now. It's a great opportunity to ask questions. That's why it's so lovely to see so many people here in the room with us. You will be able to ask questions by raising your hand at the end of each panel, and I will then, put the questions to our different panelists. We also have people joining us streamed online digitally. Unfortunately, you won't be able to ask any questions. It's only for people that are in the room. But welcome, it's wonderful to see you all here. And as you can see in the windows around us here in the room, there is interpretation. That works always perfectly fine with the people speaking in the room, but it can get a little bit complicated with some of our guests that are joining remotely. So if that happens, just wait and the interpretation, if you're listening in another language, will return. So, that's it from me. We'll get into the panel shortly, but I'm delighted that Alex Agias-Saliba, the S&D Vice President, is sat up here with me. And to launch our event, he's going to give us some opening thoughts. So it's really great to have you with us. Thank you. The floor is yours.
First of all, thanks a lot for your introductory remarks. Good afternoon, everyone, and many thanks for your big presence today in our S&D conference, not only in this room, but also for all of those who are online with us, because as it has already been said, this event is also being web streamed. Today I have good and not so good news to share with you all, and let's start with the good news first. School dropping has been steadily going down over the last year, and we are not far from reaching the EU target of less than 9% early leavers, and this is great news. Yet, the differences between countries are still huge, and between young people living in urban or in rural areas. Also, students can increasingly set forth their diplomas when they move abroad for a semester or for longer. But this recognition of diplomas or learning experience is still incomplete at EU level. We know for a fact that student socio-economic status, which includes parents, occupation, and also educational levels, and home possessions, are still very much predictors of performance scores in learning skills. What are the chances in life if we want to give to our young people? Some more good news as well for our artists, for our professionals from the cultural sector. There are initiatives to put legislative proposals on the table that will be improving their working conditions, including when they tour or also work abroad. For this project to come true, we need the Commission to seize the opportunity and make it happen. Finally, I cannot help
Microphone for the speaker.
161 abusive lawsuits filed against journalists and also media. Now the EU has just passed a law to equip journalists against such intimidations. And the Parliament, together with Council, are working hard to pass new conditions on media freedom and also editorial independence to be effectively protected throughout our European Union. As we are reaching the end of the current mandate of the European Parliament, we are halfway. Important steps were already made. Important work is still ongoing. This is the time that we'll look at it and keep the momentum to complete it. Today we will hear about ideas and demands to shape a better future for education, a better future for culture, a better future for media in Europe. Ideas and demands from us, members of the European Parliament, as well as from experts in the field and from you all during the questions and answers in each and every panel that we have. Your suggestions will feed in the work of the current term in the European Parliament and also will set our new priorities for the next term following the EU elections. Simultaneous translation, as has been said, is going to be provided in Dutch, English, French, Italian, Spanish, and also Hungarian. At the end of our discussions, you are all most welcome to stay for a drink in this very room. And for now, I am also pleased to give the floor back to our moderator, Jack, a journalist and news correspondent covering EU affairs for a great variety of media. Jack will facilitate the discussions today and make sure to get the most of today's exchanges. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Alex, indeed. Okay, so I'll ask you to leave the presidency, and I'll ask the first panelists to make their way up to the presidency, to the stage here, so we can get into our first debate, which is going to be about for a quality education for all, looking into the education legislation that has been worked on, passed throughout this term, and perhaps what we want to change or what we need to be doing in the upcoming term of the European Union. So I'm delighted to announce that we have Marcos Ros-Sempere, who's from the S&D group, an MEP obviously, and a member of the CULT committee here in the European Parliament, and also a shadow rapporteur on the European education area. We have João Albuquerque, who is an S&D CULT member as well of the CULT committee, and shadow rapporteur on the European Year of Youth. And we have Victor Negrescu, who is a CULT committee member and an S&D MEP. Now, he's had a little bit of connectivity, so what he's done is he's sent us a video that we're going to play out a little bit later to add into our discussions here this afternoon. He's the rapporteur on the INI report on digital education. And last but not least, I hope we're going to be able to see shortly Mikael Leahy, who is the Secretary General of Solidar. I hope that he will come up on our screen. He is joining remotely as well. Can't see him now, but I'm sure that he will join us shortly. Remember that you're going to be able to ask questions to all of our panelists. So get thinking, get your hands raised towards the end of the panel. Firstly, I'm going to start with you, Marcos. Let's talk about the European education area and this sort of head towards automatic mutual recognition in education. This is so important in the European Union that sort of certificates are basically recognized across borders. Perhaps you can talk about what's happening and how important the investment's been in this sector in the last few years.
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me to this event, and thank you for this question. If I may, I'm going to switch to my mother tongue, taking the opportunity that we have interpreters. So I will give you some seconds to put your headphones on. Me preguntabas si...
So you were asking me about how far we've come in terms of implementation for the European education area, and I would say we have made significant progress in this legislative period, but we are focusing on 2025 as the date to have a real European education area, and there's still much to be done. We are at a key moment now when it comes to developing our educational policies. Now, we're not doing this, even though other political groups do. We do not see this as a an expenditure or wasted money. We think this is a hugely important investment so that we can develop an inclusive society, something that we as socialists defend. In November of last year, the European Commission published a communication on the advances that had been made in terms of implementing the European education area, and that was another milestone along our path. So this text sets out the state of play, what had been done up to then, what had been done in the different member states to implement the European education area, because this is a shared responsibility. The Commission proposed this, Parliament provided guidance and key actions, but it's the member states, together with the support of the Commission, that have to implement this. And I think here is where we really have a lot to do still. The member states are getting involved, but only very slowly, and it's the work of the member states that is really going to be key for this project to move forward. There are a number of reports that give us advice as to how this area could develop dual types of education, more inclusive education, a more integrated whole school approach, looking at better testing and evaluation methods in the classroom. So there's been reports from the Commission, from other bodies. And that's just a few of the different issues that are being looked at. We certainly can't forget the importance of the fact that we are also taking in Ukrainian students all across the European Union, and we need to maintain that commitment. There are more than 1 million Ukrainian students in the EU at the moment, so we need to provide support to schools, support the participation of Ukraine in Erasmus+, more school materials such as school books in their language, making it easier to recognize qualifications, and also improving the participation of the Ukrainian Ministry of Education. From our side, from our political group, and from the perspective of this parliament, we have been defending the importance of teaching European citizenship. This is something that I think is important to us as a society. I think it's important for young people to understand political, social, environmental concepts that are so important to us at the moment. I think giving them media and digital literacy is very important, developing critical thinking. So this civics and citizenship education is hugely important and should be part of the curriculum. We need to ensure that we have those European policies for citizenship education in place. And this should be seen alongside the European education area. What we need is a European strategy on education for European citizenship that's really based on the values and democratic principles of the European Union. Whenever I attend a particular event related to education in the EU, there's one thing that I like to reflect on, and that's how far that we have come, even though we don't have specific EU competences in the area of education. But despite this, we have made real progress. We saw the first revolution with Erasmus and this European education area. And I think together with cohesion funds and our regional development funds, Erasmus and Erasmus Plus is one of the programs that's most helped to build Europe. And it's largely thanks to this group and to the work of the Parliament. Thanks to the impetus we provided, we have reached historic levels of funding. So we have the most inclusive Erasmus program ever. We have doubled the budget that we had. And we also have two very interesting initiatives which have been incorporated to Erasmus. So the Alliance of European Universities, so that's a very interesting project, and also the Discover EU program that was a proposal of a socialist colleague. I think Erasmus and how it develops in the future will be the third university revolution. I think you're probably all aware, and I say this often, is that as social democrats, it's part of our DNA to fight for social rights. So this means really focusing on policies for people's well-being, which means education, training, and lifelong learning. Even though the EU doesn't have direct competences in this area, we have seen the crises that we have experienced over recent years, the COVID crisis, war, inflation, climate crisis, energy crisis. So it shows how important it is to invest in education to secure the future of our society. So I think making this European education area reality in 2025 is hugely important. I think you can all be sure that we will continue to fight for this from the side of the socialists, because this is going to be very important for equality and for the education system in Europe. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you've touched on so many of the topics there that are really interesting and relevant, and a lot of the policies that are necessary. Now, João, I know that you are very keen to pick up on something that Marcos was saying there about democratic participation, education, especially amongst young people. How do you feel about this need, especially as we head into these European elections, this need for sort of civic understanding of what happens in our democratic life?
Thank you very much, Jack. Well, I can only echo what Marcos just said. He gave a very extensive overview of the work that we have been doing on the Parliament side, and it's fundamental that we focus on the achievements that we have had, because they are extremely important. But going to the question that you have raised, and I think this is a great opportunity for us to discuss this afternoon, is to deconstruct the misperception that exists nowadays that young people are not politically active and not politically engaged. This is not what I see. This is not even what statistics show and what young people transmit. What we see, and this is true, and it's worrying, is a diminishing participation in terms of political parties, which is very different from not being engaged and not being active and not being preoccupied with the world that is around us. And if we focus on this, the majority of the concerns that young people voice when addressed about these issues is a lack of understanding, first, of how the system works, and then how to participate inside of the system to achieve what you want to achieve and to introduce and push for the change that you want to push. And in order to achieve this, and you're talking about elections, it is fundamental that we create the mechanisms inside of the educational system to put citizenship education at the core of the educational system, not as an accessory, not as a lateral topic that should be addressed in different topics, but as the core of our educational system and what it should be. And why do I think that this is important? Because when we are talking about education, it is fundamental that we ask ourselves the question, what are we trying to achieve through education? Of course, the first thing that comes to mind is the scientific knowledge and what we get from learning in schools regarding all fields of science. And this is important to get the access to knowledge. But we are also forming people. We are forming people to become citizens. And thus we have to discuss what is the idea and the concept of being a citizen. And being a citizen, in my perspective, is not only to be a consumer, a voter, or a taxpayer. It's much more than this. It's also to be part of an active actor of change in our society. We need to do that in order to have people that are critical in society, that have the capacity to change. And if we want to introduce these issues, then we need to reconsider what is the role of schools. And for many young people, for many kids in schools, schools represent the only safe space that they can have in their lives throughout growing up, where we have the most anxiety towards ourselves, towards our identity, towards who we are. Schools need to be the safe space where you can actually be offered the possibility to be yourself, regardless of the contradictions that you can most of the times find in what should be your safest environment, which should be your family. And we know that for many people, families are not a safe environment. And families, unfortunately, cannot provide all the conditions that young people need to thrive, not only in terms of their identities and their respect for their identities, but also in terms of their basic needs. We know that still in Europe, in many cases, for poor families, schools are the only place where kids can get access to a hot meal throughout the day. So we need to think about also the fact that schools need to provide nutritious meals that can actually tackle poverty and inequality. So this is very important that we rethink the way of schools. But then we also need to rethink the way of how we learn. We have just learned this week about the new results of the PISA outcome results from education throughout the world in the OECD countries. And we have seen a very worrying drop in terms of knowledge on scientific level from European students, especially when compared to Asian countries. Singapore has sustainably become the leading country in terms of results on many scientific levels, especially in terms of reading and mathematics, but also in terms of science. And I think we need to ask ourselves the questions: what did we do in order to change the educational system to tackle the biggest problem that we have? Everybody goes to school now. It's not like in the beginning of the century, of the 20th century, where just a minority went to school, where education could be personalized and individualized. We have a massive educational system without tending to the individual needs that we all have. And we have become very comfortable in Europe with the fact that there are different levels of progression inside of the educational system that are, most of them, based on socioeconomic differences. So if you are coming from a very privileged socioeconomic background, you are more keen to thrive and to succeed rather than if you are from a poor socioeconomic background. So we need to create the conditions to have a truly democratic educational system that is based on the idea that not just one person progresses, but everybody progresses. And that we cannot all progress while everybody progresses. This is absolutely fundamental, and it's the only way to break the silos in which we live nowadays, because people from different socioeconomic backgrounds do not mingle with each other. They live separately, and they live separate lives from one another. And we need to public education and public school to again become the silo breaker in terms of the educational challenges that we have in front of us. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much. I think it's really interesting when we talk about that idea. Education is not just sort of a formative, get a certificate, it is a formative part of human existence for everybody. And you see it, especially those divisions, as you mentioned. Now, what is interesting, and the person we're going to hear from next is Victor Negrescu, who, as I mentioned, had some technical difficulties, but essentially recorded what he was going to say to us today. And he was the rapporteur on the digital education report. So amongst all of this discussion around personal education, we know how much is changing in the way that we learn digitally. So let's hear his video. I hope we'll be able to play it now.
First of all, I want to thank you for the possibility to address this conference today. I want to thank our colleagues from the S&D Group for organizing this important event, and especially our Vice President, Alex Saliba, for this great initiative. We have to talk about education at European level, and we need to identify the best solution for our educational system to develop, modernize, and have the positive impact that everyone expects. We need to tackle the issues related to accessibility, but also related to quality with regards to education, and in particular, in relation to new educational methods but also the ethical use of new technologies. For that, I have always called upon the need to building a partnership with the relevant stakeholders, involving educators and learners, parents and local communities, NGOs, and even the private sector in order to plan for the future of education. And for that, we need to involve really everyone, despite the difficulty, in the creation process of this new future. We need a new co-creation methodology for our educational system. We need a pact for education, and we also need a European fund for education. I have actually introduced the proposal for a new fund at the Conference for the Future of Europe, and it was, by the way, included in the recommendations. Such a fund that will follow the creation of the European educational area will ensure that no learner will be left behind, that all teachers will receive adequate training, that our proposals included in my report related to digital education will become a reality. We need to focus on people. A people-centered education is key for empowering citizens, strengthening our resilience and our democracies, preparing us for the future and the upcoming challenges. Like yourselves, I strongly believe in education. Let us make Europe believe in education as well by making education a European competence. Thank you again, and I wish you the best of luck for your conference.
So a huge thanks to Victor for making the effort to do that video when he was having connection problems. And again, some of the issues that we've heard about already on the panel. Now, I'm going to try and bring in Mikael Leahy, who I hope we will be able to see remotely, who is the Secretary General of Solidar. Yeah, we've got you. Wonderful. Thanks so much for joining us. Solidar is a European and worldwide network of civil society organizations working to advance social justice through a transition in Europe and indeed worldwide. I hope you've been able to hear what we've been discussing so far. Wonderful. I wonder, the legislative process and the things that we've seen, this increase of the budget to Erasmus, these ideas of cross-border certification, etc. How are these affecting people? How are the things that are happening within this building and within EU sort of spheres in the Commission Council, etc.? How are they changing the education systems in the European Union in a positive way, I hope?
Thank you, Jack, for this opportunity. Thank you to the S&D Group for having me this afternoon. It's a pleasure to be with you, even though it would have been better to sit next to friends in the parliament today. First of all, let me say that Solidar has been very actively involved in all of these initiatives that's been touched upon now, such as digital education and its action plan, the European education area and the development of this, how we would like to see Erasmus change and the broadening and enlargement of its scope, as well as these various Commission years that we see as the European Year of Youth and the European Year of Skills. Solidar has taken active part in this, and we've been very happy about the cooperation so far. I think, to be honest, I think it's quite hard for a regular citizen in EU to really feel the outcome of it there. There's a lot of reasons for why EU remains a sort of opaque player in the field of education. Well, first of all, competences. There's not much incentive for anyone at the national level to really pry the EU for advancements in this regard. It's something you would like to stick to yourself, since it's also something that remains a vital element for a lot of our electorate, right? It's an important issue for people, generally speaking, and you want to be able to take credit for the advances made. So I think EU at large remain quite elusive. I think the most clear way in which it has had an impact is through Erasmus. I think Erasmus, in the eyes of our members all across Europe, but also in a very broad sense, is one of the sort of most formidable achievements of the European Union as a whole. It's one of the most clearest ways in which the principles of Europe is embodied in the sense of a mutually recognized shared experience by thousands and thousands of people all across Europe in what Europe can be and what it matters for us, how it facilitates our participation in European life. So I think Erasmus is perhaps one of the clearest ways in which this matters. But if I may just also comment on some of these issues, such digital education. I think here for us, there are two really important things that we always come back to. And one is something that's been mentioned. It's about equal access to opportunities. And we know there's a quite large digital divide, not just in terms of access to hardware, internet, and such, but also in terms of knowledge. There's a knowledge gap here. We know from statistics that roughly half of Europeans masters even basic digital skills. And as more and more of our public sphere transfers into the digital realm, this becomes increasingly important. And that also relates then to citizenship education. How do we also relate to this development in our citizenship education aspirations? Because the digital revolution that we're currently experiencing will change everything. I think it's no understatement to say that we find ourselves in a pivotal moment of human history where essentially everything in our life will be digitalized. And here we need to be in front of the train, we're on the train, not in front of the train, so to speak. Secondly, the commodification of education that comes with this, because currently the digital revolution is driven by global digital companies or IT companies. And they're also finding their way into the educational system. And here there is no real public support for learners, for teachers, for schools to really address this and sort of capacitate themselves in relation to this. So it's sort of quite what we see a lot through our members, and what we get and as testimonies of is a quite sort of naive, uncritical usage of and sort of opening up for these actors into the educational sphere. And here we have then a quite tacit privatization of a large part of content and methods of education currently. And here the public needs to really step in and show that they have a role to play. And I wouldn't be a Secretary General of a civil society network if I also didn't say that while we're very happy with the European education area, the main thing that perhaps lacking here is, once again, equity and the involvement of civil society in the co-development of the policies related to the EEA. And here, more specifically, the non-formal and informal learning organizations that constitutes a large part of the formation process that Joao was referring to in relation to truly informed and capacitated citizenry that we all need in this challenging time. So those are perhaps some of the points. And my final request, and I will echo as part of the lifelong learning platform, Solidar will also echo the proposal that we shared in the Education Summit that at least 20% of public expenditure will be dedicated to education, because as our friend Ross Semperi just said, this is not expenditure. It's quite crazy, to be frank, that this has managed to trickle into the public discourse as such, while everyone, all of us, has been in education. And we all know that we have benefited from it in the form of an investment. It's not an expenditure almost by definition. It can't be. How could it be? So 20% of public expenditure directed to education effort in this broad sense of the term, including all actors involved in the educational field, would be necessary as well. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Mikhail. Yeah, really interesting points. And this sort of this idea of investment and expenditure is vital, and will play a big role in the shift to become competitive with the countries that Joao was talking about, that are really streaking ahead, that see education as an investment and not in that expenditure way. Listen, we're really running quite low on time already, so I want to quickly open up the floor to questions. The idea is that this can be interactive. I know that sometimes in these rooms it can feel a little bit nerve-wracking to raise your hand, but I can see two already. So we'll start with the gentleman with the striped jumper, and then we'll come to you afterwards. We'll take both questions, and then our panelists can answer. Please state your name and who you are. That would be wonderful.
My name is Andrei Frank. I'm representing the Lifelong Learning Platform that you just heard from.
Can you come a bit closer to the microphone? Is the red light on?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, come a little bit closer.
There we go. So, Andrei Frank from the Lifelong Learning Platform, representing European civil society in education and training. As Mikhail mentioned, last week, LLLP gathered all of the stakeholders in education and training to build up a set of recommendations for the future of the European education area. And I just wanted to ask the feedback of the MEPs on two of the recommendations. Specifically, one was to have, in the next mandate of the Commission, a vice president for lifelong learning, to be able to unite all of the different sectors in lifelong learning, and also make sure that the implementation of the European education area can be done holistically across the EU institution. And the second one, as much as the civil society thanks the European Parliament for the momentous increases to the budget of the Erasmus Plus program, there's still a suffering in terms of investment in the program. So the question would be, in the future negotiations of the Erasmus Plus budget, what would be the position that the S&D group takes for raising investment into the program? Thank you.
Should we start with you, Marcos? If you would like to touch on both questions. Oh yeah, sorry. Sorry, excuse me. It was two questions, so I had them written down.
No
Please
worries.
state your name and your question.
Hello and good evening, everyone. I'm Giulia Romagnolo on the behalf of Startnet Network of the Goethe Institute. According to the last hearing reports, one of the most important topics for youth nowadays is just and fair traineeship. So my question is if there are any future horizon or new updates according to your parliamentary group as agenda line about fair traineeship in order to facilitate the access of young people to the labor market. Thank you.
Wonderful. Yeah, we will touch on this a bit later, probably in some of the other panels, but it is interesting to bring up now. Marcos, let's come to you. So the three questions essentially are lifelong learning commissioner, the budget, and
it seems to me very difficult to have a lifelong learning commissioner exclusively to this issue, even knowing that we still don't have a commissioner only dedicated for education. It's a commissioner for education, culture, researching, health, and a lot of things. So let's go step by step. I would be very thankful if we have a commissioner on education. That includes lifelong learning education, okay? It should be fantastic, but let's see what's happening with the new commission. And regarding the budget, I think that we have still not starting the negotiations for the next period, which will be 28-34. But you know that we, the Socialist Group, we demanded past negotiations for the tripling of the budget. So I think we will go on the same way. But especially, we will focus on 2 or 3 issues that we are reporting. We are having reporting back a lot of problems coming from student Erasmus organization. The one is the platform that asks for 500 Erasmus and so on. We have to increase the grants, because if not, Erasmus is only for those who can afford. Okay, and we have to increase Erasmus. The second one is we have to deal with the problem with the housing. We have asked several times the previous commissioner, what are you doing, what are you managing to solve the problem with the housing? And all the times the answers were, it's not my problem, I am commissioner for education. No, you are in a college of commissioners, and you have to deal with this problem, and we need to tackle this problem. And the third one is the inclusion. We need special grants to increase the amount of money to people who have several difficulties, economic difficulties, personal disabilities, physical disabilities, intellectual disabilities, to be granted with Erasmus that can support them to make the mobility. And I think this will be our main demands, apart from increasing the total amount for Erasmus in the next period.
Joao, can you come in on the traineeships, the third question that we got?
Yeah,
maybe?
I second what Marco said about Erasmus. I would, on the commissioner, I would very much like to see it, because I think the lifelong learning goes a bit broader than just the education, but I agree. Let's have something for education as well, because one thing that we cannot forget is that just a couple of years ago, health was not a EU competence either. So, I mean, there is always room for improvement, and there is always room to work whenever the needs arises. So step by step, I think we can do it. To respond on the internships, because Marcos brilliantly explained the track record of the SND, which has always been to demand an increase in the Erasmus funding. On the internships, this is fundamental. We know that the majority of young people start their careers, their work life through an internship. And on this, we need to be very, very, very clear that any form of labor should be remunerated. And when companies reply that, companies or organizations reply that they cannot afford to pay their internships, then they need to revise their business model. Because making a business model sustainable through the fact that you don't pay part of your employees, it's not a sustainable business model. Because you're taking advantage of the workforce of people in order to profit from this work. And this is absolutely not acceptable. It has been the position of our group and the position of the socialists in Europe to ask for a ban to unpaid internships in Europe. And we have very strongly demanded from the Commission to present a proposal, hopefully until the end of this mandate. I see it very difficult now, but we have repeatedly asked for this to become a proposal. We have had several resolutions in the Parliament, an initiative report. So it is something that is fundamental for us, and I even if it's not adopted in this mandate, I think it's a non-negotiable issue for the next mandate that the Commission needs to absolutely commit to banning unpaid internships in Europe. I will conclude just saying this. Besides the accessibility issue and the remuneration issue to give decent living for people, this has another perverse effect which we should not overlook, which is to increase the inequalities that already exist. Because people that with a favorable socioeconomic background can benefit from unpaid internships that give them a work advantage and a curriculum advantage in the future that people that cannot afford to work an unpaid internship will not have. So it adds on the inequalities that are already there and that already exist, and it has to end now.
Thanks, Joe. Let's just come to you, Mikhail, quickly. We're going to have to wrap up the panel shortly, but I wonder if you can come back on some of these issues related to the next mandate here in Brussels and here in the EU institutions. Whether you think there are structures that are important both optically for the citizens of the European Union, like an education commissioner exclusively, as we mentioned, or whether there is one piece of advice you would give to the next sort of president of the Commission or the next, Parliament here of an issue that would be a top priority that would change the game and improve Europe's educational competitiveness. I think we might. Oh yeah, no, we've got him. You're back.
I'm back.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks. No, thanks a lot. I think in relation to the next and incoming mandate period, apart from what I just said in terms of increased public spending on this, because this is, I think, is extremely relevant. I think for the incoming, there won't be a silver bullet to the issue of education for sure. But people in Europe needs to feel that Europe cares for them in these very unstable and trying times. And one way to really show this is to make sure that you allocate enough resources for their betterment and preparedness for these trying times, so that the resilience can be fostered, inequalities can be tackled. And education is repeated time and again because it's true, it's one of the key tools we have in our arsenal to tackle inequalities and sort of even the playing field in our societies. If we don't do it right, we'll end up in the situation that Joao was just mentioning, that we end up in perverse situations where educational policies actually increase and widen the gaps between learners because of pre-existing inequalities rather than the opposite. And here, so allocate adequate resources for formal, non-formal and informal learning, and make sure that we have a whole school approach that really connects the dots between these various actors would be extremely important. We spoke a lot about citizenship education. I think from our point of view, citizenship education or citizen education or civic education is quite often dealt with or thought of as a quite technical term in terms of understanding how the political machinery works, how our institutions works, how decisions are made, how laws are being made, and so forth. But we would like to push for the idea of a global citizenship education that actually in these times of crisis widens the idea of what citizenship education should be. Because we need to not just understand how our institutions work, but actually how this world works and how we are affected by it and how we're part of it, to be able to really understand our place in this world of global characters. So this would also be very important to give it another push and make sure, as Joao also said, that this finds itself at the heart of the educational system. It's not an add-on, it's not a voluntary thing, it's not an additional course, it's the perspective that permeates all our educational efforts, be it in the formal education system or outside. And by the way, here civil society actors are formidable cooperation partners in the implementation of civic education and global citizenship education, since there's a lot of resources, competences, and engagement to be found in civil society in this particular term. So really evaluate and underline the role that civil society can play to make many of the things we talked about today come true.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, we all sit on our phones and, follow politics in far-flung places of the world, and it affects our opinion, that idea of a global understanding. Yeah, really important. Okay, we're going to wrap our first panel up there on education. A huge round of applause for our panelists, please. To Marcos, to Joao, to Michael, and to Victor Negrescu as well. Okay, so I'll ask you to leave the stage for a moment. We're going to move straight on to our next panel, which is going to be about towards a Europe for culture. Something that's really important, obviously, as well. We have many members of the Culture Committee here in the European Parliament who are going to be able to shed some light on what's happened, shed some light on what we need to do. I'll invite them up onto the stage. Yeah, the names. As you say, this chair's in the way there. So also just to remember that you will be able to ask your questions a bit later on. We're going to go as quick as we can because we have a lot of panelists, a lot of people speaking. The first of whom will be Massimiliano Smireo, who is an S&D Culture Committee coordinator and shadow rapporteur on the Creative Europe programme. It's wonderful that you're here with us this afternoon. Fred Matic, who is an S&D member of the Cult Committee. Hannes Haider, who, as well, another MEP and member of the Cult Committee. Do we have Dominic with us? Ah, wonderful. I didn't see you. There you are. Yeah, you were waiting for my call to join the stage. Dominic Ruiz de Veza, who is another member of the Cult Committee and a rapporteur on the Statute of the Artist in the culture and creative sectors. That's been really interesting around town recently. And last but not least, Lars Ebert, who is the Secretary General of Culture Action Europe, which is an association which advocates access to the arts and participation in culture as a fundamental right of every citizen. Okay, we're going to start with you, Massimiliano. Perhaps you can bring us up to speed on what's been done within the Creative Europe programme during this mandate.
Intanto, grazie.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Jack. I'm grateful to Solidar and all of the other organisations, plus, of course, our group. But let me start with a joke. The decisions mentioned by the previous panel are all technical decisions, they're political decisions. So how the future budget of the EU is managed will be a political decision based on the outcome of the elections. Now, our group has always been one of the most active in the defence of the importance of the cultural world, especially the audiovisual world, and the importance of information. And to be honest, we have done quite a lot. There's always the option of doing more, obviously. but the budget for this 7-year period has gone from 1.4 billion for Creative Europe to 1.7 billion. Now, the Creative Europe programme is one of our primary contacts with the world of culture through cinema, the audiovisual world, through festivals and other cultural events. And we've improved 3 features. We've improved the budget, we've simplified the programme, which has improved accessibility, which in turn is a factor in democracy, because the more complicated things are, the harder it is for small operators to access these programmes, particularly down in the south. And then we have also sought to try and make sure that smaller operators have had access to this programme. And thirdly, there is now the option of using Creative Europe within the publishing world, in fashion, design, and music. So, if we look at the current situation, when people always talk about the importance of culture, it's part of our identity, people say it's part of the identity of our continent. That's what people will say on the weekend discussion programmes, but it's not so obvious during the working week to get people to stop in front of cultural exhibitions rather than thinking in terms of agriculture or firearms or industry or technology. So we think that a lot of work has been done by our group that has actually raised the profile of Creative Europe, which in itself has been very positive.
Yeah, loads has been done, and as you say, that increase to the budget is positive, and it can be really difficult. The idea of cultural identity, especially in the divided, well, not divided, but the differences in the across borders in Europe, it's one of the beautiful things, but it's quite hard to sort of pin down sometimes. I want to come to you, Fred, because this idea, this expression of values as being our culture, how can we use the cultural sector to ensure or try to reduce discrimination, reduce prejudice, to open up societies to one another? And what can be done here in the Parliament on that?
Thank you, Jack. If you allow me, I will continue in my mother tongue, Croatian.
When thinking about Europe for culture, one of the biggest resources that the culture offers is peace, integration, inclusion, and intercultural learning. One of the topics that we dealt with throughout this mandate is the strength of cultural policy in fighting discrimination, inequalities, and racism. I could mention the document I worked on. It's the strategy of Roma inclusion. We have to be aware of the fact that the situation in Europe is not good. Roma still have limited access to numerous rights. They are marginalized, discriminated against, and that they keep fighting numerous barriers when it comes to employment and education. Unfortunately, the situation is like that in Croatia as well. This shows that a lot of work is still ahead of us, and culture is an area where we can do a lot. I am a war veteran, and I was a hostage, and I really know very well that peace and tolerance are crucial. By learning about different cultures, we are developing an understanding of the world, and these are bases for integration and peaceful coexistence. And today, while we are seeing several wars, it is more important than ever to talk about peace and understanding. Cultural policies are a basic element for that, because people who would never met can become friends. Children can learn about a world which is different than their own, they can expect it, and then they can become understanding adults. We have to be aware that others are an opportunity and a richness. Culture is a whole mirror of the society. I like to often mention the statement by Churchill. I hope it's true. When the war started, he said, "We will not have enough means for this war." And some of his colleagues said, "We'll take it from culture." But Churchill then replied, "So why are we then going to war?" Thank you.
Yeah, really interesting one. And this, I mean, cultural exchanges are so important to reduce, problems in the European Union, friendships. So I want to talk to you, Hannes, about the European capital of culture. I often say, not to sort of talk too much about myself, but I often say I'm a child of the European Union. I did Bristol, Bordeaux French exchange when I was a kid. I went to university in Liverpool when it was the European capital of culture, did an Erasmus exchange myself. That year for me, when it was the capital of culture, was amazing. We saw so much. How important is that program, and what's the sort of vision for it going forward?
Yeah, thank you. And it's true, European capitals of culture are a true success story of the European Union. They are a lighthouse project, and they are a brand, and they still have quite a lot of potential. And they create awareness, they create partnership, they create cooperation. And the definition of culture in European capitals of culture is very broad. It should be understood as a catalyst, as a driver for economy, for tourism development, for education, for mobility, for digitization, for living together, for creating a good future. And there have been different phases of the European capitals of culture, and it all started on an initiative of Melina Mercouri, then Greek Minister for Culture, together with Jacques Lang, Minister for Culture in France. And in the first years, you could become only European capital of culture if you were a city like Athens, like Florence. You were awarded for what you are, what you are. And it has changed. There was a second phase where growing cities, growing not only by population, but also in importance, had the opportunity, the chance to take culture to develop when there is change. There were cities like Linz in Austria or Graz. I'm Austrian, so they're still very well known, the European capitals of culture. There was Essen with the Ruhr area, which showed what could happen. And now it has changed. Now you are not awarded for what you are, but for what you want to be. And it's not a festival for 1 year. It's not a festival of arts and culture. It's not a firework where only smoke is left. It's a process of development, of urban development, and also for regional development. And I have to say, the panel decisions are often very brave when they decide which city, which region should have the title. And I want to bring one example that could illustrate what European Capital of Culture means, because in one applying city in France, when Marseille became a European Capital of Culture, the international panel was brought in an opera house, had a reception, had very good wine, and was watching concerts. And on the other side, they came to Marseille, and they were brought into a prison, because there was an image, and the city wanted to change this image, and there were prisoners that were making a project, that were making a program, a cultural program, and this illustrates what the European Capital of Culture is, and it's a really great chance and opportunity for Europe, for the European Union. And just to keep in mind, it's not only a European Capital of Culture in EU states. It's next year, for example, it is Bodø in Norway, who is one of the 3 European capitals of culture. Last year, it was Novi Sad in Serbia, and you see what this project, this idea could do. But now I'm talking about the problems we have. When you enter the European Parliament, Then I'm sure you have seen advertisement for our Lux Film Awards. It's a very important initiative. But when you walk through Brussels, you won't see any sign what 3 European capitals of culture we have this year. It's not present here in the European Parliament. It's not present in the Commission. And we had talks with former European capitals of culture, with future European capitals of culture, and they addressed 2 main things. The European Commission should be present in European capitals of culture. Often it's only the national commissioner at the opening ceremony. They demand high-level presence of the European Commission and or European conferences to show this European spirit in a European capital of culture. And to become European capital of culture, you have to compete in the application process, in the bidding process. And then you get the title and you spend a lot of money, but you have no money granted. The only money you get is the Melina Mercury Prize, and it's 1.5 million euros, and it hasn't been, it didn't rise in the last decade. It's still 1.5 million, and this is all the European Union for sure is contributing. Of course, it's the big chance to get Creative Europe project, to get Erasmus Plus project, to get Interreg, but it's not for granted. And European capitals of culture, of course, should be a driver also for infrastructure, for cultural infrastructure, for reviving cultural sites, and there is no money granted. And then you have the calls, and then you are in European Fund for Regional Development, for example. You have to start again, and this is also a demand. Give European capitals of culture a certain budget, also from European regional development funds. And then, and this is very important, culture is not a competence in the European Union. Creative Europe budget in the last period for 1 year was the same as the operating cost of the Paris Opera. So we see in what connection it is and what opportunity the European Union has, and it has to take responsibility.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It's peanuts, as we would say, just very small amounts of money that are given to something that is actually super fundamental and also a very good look for the European Commission to be involved in. It can really improve the sort of optics and the visual of things. I want to come down to you though, Dominic, because one of the things that artists face, it's not easy to be an artist anywhere, and it kind of never has been, right? That's the fundamental, it's part of the sort of courage of being an artist, is sort of living a life that necessarily doesn't have that sort of stability that a job perhaps would have in the normal sense of the world. You've been leading a file on the statute of the artist proposal. Perhaps you can explain to someone that maybe hasn't heard of it before what this is about in Europe and what it hopes to achieve and where we're at with that.
Thanks a lot, Jack, and thanks to Massimiliano and to Petra for organizing this very important workshop. I thought we were going to be the MEPs speaking to ourselves, but I see the room is very large, so this has aroused the interest of the people from the sector here in Brussels. I'm very happy because indeed we have a lot to show, as we have heard from the previous colleagues. And both, if you look at to what Massimiliano, that he focused on Creative Europe, Fred on the importance of culture for life, and Hannes on the European Capital of Culture, all of this is the final product, no? What people enjoy, no? But behind all that, you have the workers, the cultural workers and the artists that produce all these things, no? And indeed, as you said, Jack, there is this myth of, some call it the starving artist, no? Kind of, if you want to, typically parents are never very happy when the son or the daughter say, I want to be an artist, no? It's not the most celebrated, and parents fear this is going to be a precarious life, an unstable life, and so on and so forth, no? And indeed, this is a general problem in Europe for all member states. And we have seen also that we have an heterogeneous approach. Not all member states have addressed this question, the living and working conditions of the artists, and at the same time, those that have done it, they are using contradictory, different approaches. No? So this is why, as Social Democrats, we thought it was very important to propose this European framework for this topic, the Statute of the Artist. And I think we have approved in the plenary a very good report with a large majority also, more than 400 votes in the plenary. It has been also a cross-party effort because I had as co-rapporteur in the MPEL committee, which is, of course, this was a joint effort from the Cultural Committee and the Employment Committee, and my colleague Tom Manders from the European People's Party. So it was also, I think, a good collaborative effort across political families. And what we highlighted in this resolution was first, that we have to put an end to the so-called buyout contracts, by which this in fact means a violation of the European model of copyright, no? When the artist is forced to forsake his or her intellectual property rights in the context of a contract that he's forced to sign. And of course, you cannot sign it, but then you cannot have the expectation in the next iteration to be offered by that company, let's say Netflix, no? Or some company like that, the opportunity to work. There is a big asymmetric power here, asymmetry of power, as it is clear. The second demand is that we say very clearly that no public funding can go to finance entities that do not pay artists. There is still a lot of even institutions that sometimes even in the European Parliament there has been some activity doing that or bordering that you can ask performances or, let's say, musical activities for free, no? And not to pay the musicians, or not to pay the artists. This is still, there is this impression that, you know, if you need to fix the electricity, of course you're going to pay an electrician, no? But if you are going to include an artist in the program, maybe, well, I mean, we're giving him or her this great opportunity to perform at the European Parliament, so she may as well do it for free, no? So this is something that we really need to change the mindset. So we call this social conditionality. We cannot really finance activities that takes this approach. And then, final point, we are asking the Commission to put forward a legislative proposal, which is something quite bold, and establish a directive precisely on decent working conditions that can provide, as I said at the beginning, a common European framework for all artists in Europe. Not only because of the heterogeneity, which is in itself an issue, but because even taking a more private sector or internal market approach, all the artists operate also in the internal market. That means that one day you can do something in France, the other day you can be in Germany. There is a big sector of mobile artists and cultural workers. And then we have also the co-productions. So in these situations, the mobility and the co-productions, which is the right national framework that you want to apply. Of course, lawyers, we have solutions for everything, but sometimes they are very sophisticated and not very practical. So for all these reasons, we think it's very important that we can have this directive, this proposal for a directive in the next months.
Thank you so much for outlining that. I know the Commission's got like 3 months or something to reply to your call. So that is something that can also start to actually get movement even before the elections as well. I want to come down to you, Lars, from Culture Action Europe. I know that for you guys, budget is fundamental, right? And that's your call.
Absolutely. First of all, thanks very much to the Socialists and Democrats for inviting us to make a contribution, and Jack for the question. And I'm really happy that previous speakers have somehow also related to that question as well. Culture Action Europe, as the largest and major network of other cultural networks, organizations and individuals, cultural workers, artists, policymakers, is of course concerned mainly to bring culture at the heart of the public debate and policy making, but also mainstream culture into other policy areas, and other policy areas of course include first and foremost also budget policies. We are very happy that during this legislative term there was a sort of precedent that we are very proud of, where together with our partners from the European Cultural Foundation that are present here as well, we've been successfully fighting for the 2% broadly across the recovery and resilience plans to be dedicated for the cultural sector. And that has been a campaign that has been spearheaded by the sectors that have been working together. But let me also mention Mr. Smerilio's Creative Europe report in 2021, which managed to secure the biggest envelope ever for Creative Europe. And I'm also very happy with the little footnote that we've got, that it equals the operational budget of the Paris Opera. I mean, you know, we are very happy with the breadcrumbs that we get because we are a precarious sector, but it is still breadcrumbs, and we need to keep fighting for a grown-up budget, so to speak, a budget that can address the urgencies of the area out there, which we are ready to address, but we need a respective empowerment. But there is a point that often gets lost in translation. I mean, we are not only a sector that is begging for more money. We know what we need the money for. I mean, we especially want to also talk about how the money is spent, what the priorities are. And in a way, when I looked at the program again, I sort of thought, in analogy with the previous panel, actually we should have called this panel Quality Culture for All. And I was really happy that the European citizenship was mentioned in the previous panel, because I think it reflects very much our plea for a cultural citizenship, where culture is part of the lifelong learning efforts, is part of, you know, countering this identity and populist discourse that's going on, and so forth. And those are conversations about priorities, how the money is spent, where we have very clear opinions and speak with our sectors. And I'm happy to speak with those who make the budgets and the priorities in the calls. In 2024, the annual budget, thanks to the intervention of the European Parliament, we managed to safeguard the funding against the proposed cuts. I mean, it has kept us busy during the summer, but we are really happy that the Creative Europe budget is untouched for next year. But of course, on the horizon for the new college and the new parliament is the MFF. It was already mentioned, 28 to 24, where, I mean, we still have the vivid memory of 2018, where Creative Europe was deleted, and I mean it was traumatic. So we are alert and want to be prepared that that doesn't happen. But on the contrary, also make sure that the next MFF will have the highest budget ever allocated to culture. We can't just fight for the status quo, and that does not only count for Creative Europe, but also for Horizon, for Erasmus+, for the Cohesion, Green and External Action Funds, to name just a few. Sorry for that. But then in these, especially when it comes to Horizon, where, I mean, a lot of money is that we could use to reach the priorities that I've already mentioned, it needs to be ensured that these calls are widely accessible for the cultural and creative sectors. They are a little bit better accessible, but not really at the moment. When it comes to to lawmaking, I think I cannot other than refer again to our flagship campaign that we are leading with the European Cultural Foundation and Europa Nostra, a cultural deal for Europe, where we call, in an analogy for a Green Deal, for really a sea change in how we look at cultural policies in the EU, and of course mainstream culture through all other policy areas, but also address a few key factors that we are spelling out in our call. A few weeks ago, we have issued a joint open letter to sitting and prospective MEPs, as well as European political parties, to ask them to commit to culture in the upcoming EU elections. A plea I'm really happy and driven to repeat now here, because I think the right people are not the ones that need to be convinced, but the ones that can spread the word are in the audience. Culture is much more than a sector of the economy. It is rather the field that brings us together as communities, and that also addresses all the factors that scare us at the moment. I personally have lived in the Netherlands for the 20 years. The election outcomes shake me to the bones, and I think they are a warning sign for the rest of Europe. Culture is, I don't want to say it's the remedy for everything, but the narrative of our identity, the narrative, that card has been played by the wrong people, and we should make sure that culture is empowered to counter that movement. In concrete terms, the next S&D policy agenda for culture should, for instance, follow up on the working conditions legislative report, which we applaud, and make sure that the proposal for a directive on decent working conditions is included in the mission letter of the next Commissioner for Culture. And let me add at the end the theme of freedom of expression, the triple freedom of expression, media, academic, and artistic. As we know how key for the current EU mandate media freedom has been, and you will soon speak about the Media Freedom Act, but let me stress one element. Either we uphold freedom of expression altogether, or we won't succeed with our shared effort to preserve and promote it. There is a renewed momentum for safeguarding academic freedom in Europe. Let's make sure together that the new legislative term sees advances also in the protection of artistic freedom. Okay. PES and S&Ds should be vocal about it and advocate in the Council and with the new Commission for a meaningful inclusion of artistic freedom as an indicator of respect of the rule of law. Okay. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Lars. Really interesting. And like you said, this idea of identity, how we see ourselves and how that fits into the broader European identity, especially as we head into elections, is so important. We are running super low on time, but let's get some questions. That's the whole, yeah. Okay, wonderful. I've got 3 questions. Well, please, very short questions. Please direct them to people and we'll try and pick up on a few. Yeah, at the back there.
Yes, hello. Julie Jeanne Regnault, I'm the head of the Association of all European film and audiovisual centers in Europe. You are lucky to have one public authority in each country. Just to thank you for this conference and for the work done by the S&D MEPs on all the cultural dossier, Creative Europe, Statute of the Artist. Just a word to raise the alarm about the geo-blocking file, the Mazurek report that will be voted next week in the Parliament in plenary session. We are talking about cultural diversity. Here it's about audiovisual cultural diversity. We all want more European films online, well promoted in all the countries, but we know that if you remove geo-blocking, it will mean less films, less European films in different languages, they will be less distributed, it will kill cinemas and affect also distributors, basically the entire European value chain. So we know that several S&D MEPs are very well informed, we thank them, and I hope the group will support the amendments that were tabled towards more cultural diversity. Thank you very much.
Okay, we'll ask someone to respond to that in a second. You, sir, please.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Michael from the Institut d'études européennes. We've been speaking about multiculturalisms. I would like to know, in the aftermath of the wars since the fact that European doors are having this perception of war again. How can that contribute to this sense of detachment from the European Union, or conversely to foster this sense of belonging to the European Union? And secondly, in taking into consideration the relevance of multiculturalism, how can, in the prospect of further enlargement, that could be instrumentalized by European election in 2024?
Thank you very much. We'll get that. Please.
Yeah, that's working? Yeah, okay. Thank you. My name is Stefan Gies. I'm the head of the European Association of Higher Music Education Institutions and also a board member of Culture Action Europe. Just referring to the idea or to the paradigm of cultural democracy and also the plea for cultural citizenship, I would just remind that has been under the Portuguese Council presidency in 2021, this great outcome of the Porto Santo Charter, which was exactly about these topics. And I would propose, so to say, if the S&D family could take ownership of kind of Porto Santo Charter follow-up, which never has been done. And I think it's exactly in line with what I heard from you as a program. And just to referring a little bit on one point about Horizon, which was been mentioned, there is also this new cultural cluster, which has to be worked out in depth. And I think you could find also an opportunity to make more research on these kind of things. And my question would be if this kind of, I mean, giving access to much broader community people than beforehand to cultural education was one of the core claims of the Porto Santo Charter. So be opening up cultural education beyond the usual well-educated white middle-class people. Is that something that is reflected in the political program of S&D?
Thank you, sir. Cheers. And we'll just take one final quick question here.
Hello, good afternoon and thank you very much. Ich habe verstanden, dass man hier auch Deutsch reden kann, daher möchte ich das gerne.
I think I can speak German here, so let me take that opportunity. I realise you're going to have to put your headphones on. My name is Heidi Meisnitz. I am part of the permanent representation of Austria and I'm responsible for culture. I have a question for Mr. De Visa. So thank you very much for this excellent report. It's very significant as a report. I was the co-chair in relation to the report from the council, and so this is a really important issue. I tried to listen very carefully, especially to what you said about the follow-up. So I'm just wondering, what are the next practical steps over the next year? It's going to be a critical year, but there isn't that much time for the European Parliament to take action. I'm a little bit concerned that so much expertise has gone into this report. There are so many recommendations, and these precarious contracts are a real problem in the culture sector. We would like to see an improvement. I'm concerned that we mustn't lose what has already been achieved. So I'm wondering, practically speaking, what is in the pipeline? What between the Parliament and the Commission do you have planned? It can't just keep being postponed, because we'll have elections, then we'll have a new commission, and there are other challenges, more will come up, I'm sure, and so I'm really concerned to know how we can ensure that things don't stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Vielen Dank. Okay, let's start with the geo-blocking, and let's come to you, Ms. Massimiliano. I know that you can we try and be as quick as we can on these questions just for the timing of the event, but please come in.
È una discussione.
Well, it's a very open and complicated discussion. Even within our group, we have a divergence of opinion. We know that this is a major issue. At the same time, we need to pull together the desire to create a single European market with access to cultural goods, and at the same time appreciate the context, which is what I feel. We need to defend intellectual property rights, copyright, until within national systems we have a system for requiring platforms to provide this. Well, I don't really understand what's going on here. The thing is that we have a system which is designed to encourage cultural work and activity. There are a number of amendments that have been suggested which are designed to improve the opening up of cinema copyright, but not at the expense of Europe. We don't want to take away resources from Creative Europe. So if there is an openness from other programs, then that would be great. But this is a very difficult discussion. We want to have the right of access, but we also need to provide support for what is a very fragile sector with a number of problems that it is facing.
Thank you, Massimiliano. Let's move on to the question that we had here, which was about the sort of perception of war and potentially creating a detachment to the European Union. Fred, would you like to come in on that? And also the discussion was about multiculturalism being instrumentalized in elections. I suppose you could probably talk about that as well.
Vrlo kratko, dakle, kao što sam...
Very briefly, as I said in my speech, in our political family, the others are considered as an opportunity, not as a problem or damage. When tanks are speaking, the muses are silent. You heard about that. We have to change everything in order to have more culture and less wars.
Thank you so much. Maybe let's move on to the final question that we had, because that was for you, Dominic, specifically about the next steps in the process and the clear recommendations that prevent it falling into the interinstitutional wastelands, as some files can sometimes do.
That's a nice metaphor. Institutional wastelands. I will write it down for the next time, but I will quote you. As Jack Parrott says. Okay.
Feel free. I've seen many pieces.
We have
of
to
law in
respect
Brussels
the intellectual property rights. No, well, we have to give a bit of background to this question. In a way, yes, we have approved this report late in the mandate, right? It was last plenary, as a matter of fact, the one in November. And this has an explanation. We had to fight very hard from S&D, and particularly Petra Kamerevert. At that time, you were, I believe, representing the group in the coordinators alongside Massimiliano, and you played a key role there, because we proposed it at the beginning of the term, and it took many meetings of the coordinators to get the political support to have this report. So this is why it has come. I think this is important also for the colleagues to know, because this is what you don't see. What goes on in the inside is also part of the political life. It is not. It doesn't work like one of us wakes up in the morning and says, I'm going to write a report on the statute of the artist. No. You need to convince your group, and your group needs to convince the other groups to make it. And this takes sometimes more time than we like. Second, we have a good thing, which is that under the Spanish presidency, of the Council, which I also thank, and not because I am Spanish, but because they managed to put a political debate at the level of the ministers in the Council on this very same topic. And there has been a very good work done at the level of the working parties under the open method of coordination. So what we are now promoting, and I think we can do it, is that under the Belgian presidency, we have not more debate, but wording, like conclusions on this topic, which will be very good coming from the Council, as we were able to do with the Council conclusions in November on citizenship education. And then, yes, the Commission has to make the legislative proposal. I think they can still make it, because they have the 3-month period that Jack was recalling. A different question is that we are not going to be able to approve it before June, but we can have the proposal done by the Commission in the first part of the year.
I'm going to have to ask you to wrap up.
Well, that's the end.
Wonderful, sorry. I'm sorry to ruin the end.
And then we...
Perfect, Dominic. Thank you so much. I'm sorry to interrupt you. Just we're running nearly 20 minutes over our time. Would anyone like to come in on the Porto Santo Charter? Is anyone? Yeah, would you like to come in, Lars, quickly?
Yeah, I think the Porto Santo Charter would be, for our sectors, extremely important to develop through, because they have this triple set of recommendations for institutions, for policymakers, and for citizens. So a lot comes together in there already, and we could operationalize that much more. And also, I see a relation to the recent very welcomed report of Culture and Democracy, the evidence, where, I mean, participation in cultural life is looked at to a certain extent, and I think we could go a step further and see how we not only lower the threshold to participate in activities, but really co-author cultural offers together, and that's where the Porto Santo Charter shows us a way forward. And if, as Stefan proposed, this group would take up the initiative and be a home for that further development, we would welcome that, of course.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm sorry that we've run so low on time, but really interesting discussion. Please, can we have a round of applause for our second panel? Thank you. I'll ask you to exit the stage as soon as possible, and we'll bring up our next panel. There is a time limit on this room, which is why I'm sort of racing as well to make sure that we can speak to everyone. So I'm going to invite our next set of MEPs to the stage. And this panel now we're going to turn on to media freedom in a digital world. As a journalist myself, something that is extremely important to me. Please remember that you can ask questions at the end of this panel as well. And we will... Hey, G. We should have... hello, yeah. Great to see you, Gerard. How are you doing? Exactly. Hello, Ben. Good to see you. So I'll introduce you to our panelists. We have Petra Kamerevert, who is a Cult Committee member and also a coordinator for the S&D, and a shadow rapporteur on the European Media Freedom Act, extremely important at the moment. We have Sylvie Guillaume, who, as well as an S&D member, and a shadow rapporteur on the strategic lawsuits against public participation. It's kind of a long, complicated name for SLAPS, which is about silencing journalists, which is really important. Well, to not do, obviously, and to prevent. We have Iban Garcia del Blanco, an S&D MEP and rapporteur on the European streaming market, and a shadow rapporteur on the metaverse, so slightly related to the question that came before, and Gerard Rinser-Ostervik, who is a policy analyst on digital at the Foundation for European Progressive Studies. It's awesome that you're all here. Thank you so much for joining us. I want to start with you, Petra. Being a rapporteur on the European Media Freedom Act has been quite a job for you, I assume, especially in the last few months. There's real concerns about different aspects of the proposal. There's this issue around Article 17. Some are worried that it would be sort of allowing media service providers too much power. Some are saying, no, we need to make sure that there's an open market. I wonder if you can just give us an update on what's going on with the European Media Freedom Act and where we are legislatively with it right now.
Ja, vielen herzlichen Dank.
Thank you very much.
Ja, wo stehen wir bei Medienfreiheit?
So where are we when it comes to the situation with the Media Freedom Act? Now, I can't tell you too much from the negotiations just yet. Nothing is agreed till everything is agreed in the negotiations with Council. So perhaps I could just summarize it, that I'm not really satisfied with the current state of the negotiations. There's still a lot of work to be done here. I hope we will manage to make a little bit more progress. We have the big Article 4 coming up for negotiations in the coming weeks, and this is protecting journalists and the protection of their sources. So how do we protect journalists in the course of their work, protect them from attacks from the side of the state, countries who want to hinder their work, who monitor them through spyware or surveil them in different ways. So all of this is on the agenda, and it's something we will certainly look at intensively, but I'm a little bit skeptical when it comes to what kind of outcome we're going to get. Now, before we get into the details of the European Media Freedom Act, perhaps I could just start by making some more general comments with regards to media free work. I think free, diverse and independent media, whether we're talking about public or private bodies, are indispensable in a democracy. It is an important constitutive part of the democracy. Now, it's very easy to say, and people will always applaud when you say it. However, the problem is when it comes to actually implementing this in legislation and implementing this legislation as well. This is always quite challenging, and we see this in the European Media Freedom Act. I am convinced, though, that if you really believe in media freedom, you have to fight for this, and you cannot allow it to become subordinated to other goals. The main goal has to be to secure democracy. If this were not the case, then we wouldn't have free media. It would be used to further other goals. The media is not there to help the functioning of the internal market or the profits of any particular company, or to try and promote security and defense policy or the fight against terrorism. We could describe media freedom as a diva. It has a far-reaching and very strong claim to validity. Media freedom does not react well to the influence of the state. It can be very sensitive to this. If you work for media policy, you have to be uncompromising when it comes to ensuring equal opportunities in the public space. The politicians who work for this diva of media freedom can appear to be notorious complainers to others. I also strongly believe that we as Social Democrats have to really defend this media freedom that's so important for our democracy. Our grandparents fought for this in the past. So we have this responsibility to stand up for media freedom in the whole of Europe and to secure it for future generations as well. When it comes to implementing this, you're going to be less popular than when you just talk about it. But we as Social Democrats have to be resolute in defending this liberal understanding of media freedom and to work tirelessly to promote its importance. What we're talking about is protecting the basis of our society, our coexistence, and also being able to maintain liberal democracy in Europe. These guiding principles were very useful to us when it came to discussions on the Digital Services Act, the Digital Markets Act, the Audiovisual Media Services Directive, and also the European Media Freedom Act. It was definitely more helpful than an obstacle, although it did make some of the more detailed discussions difficult. I think by taking this position, we showed that we Social Democrats are reliable partners for journalists and media professionals, that they can trust us, and hopefully they will continue to trust that we will work in the future to protect media freedom. This fight remains a very necessary one. When we look at the situation in Europe, not just the usual suspects such as Hungary and Poland, I'm also looking to France, where a journalist was detained recently and was put under pressure to reveal their sources. I think if we look at the media landscape in Europe, we see that there's still a lot to do. When we look at digital transformation and reacting to current events, this is all very important. This legislation needs to continue to develop. I think we also need to be very attentive to any negative trends in European countries, but also here in Brussels as well, so that we can make timely adaptations to the legislation. Now, I don't want to delay or hinder the European Media Freedom Act, but I think we need to tackle these fundamental aspects properly rather than simply rush through them. And I feel that pressure is being applied to resolve this quickly, and I don't think that's the way we should do this. I think we need to have proper in-depth negotiations. I think Parliament has a very good position, and we need to try and push that through as far as possible. There are things that we will have to tackle in the future, such as artificial intelligence, how that will have an impact on the media, how journalists will be able to work with artificial intelligence, how that will influence the way that journalism is done. It will probably lead to a revision of the Audiovisual Media Services Act, probably in the next legislative period, as well as preserving media freedom and making sure that journalists can work independently, and also guaranteeing creative professions as well. We had an own initiative report on this subject, which I think was very useful. But I think journalists can be in a precarious position. So I would like to thank all of you from the support, sometimes critical, but also always constructive cooperation. And I hope that future Social Democrats will continue to work for media plurality and freedom, and may have to use some imagination to implement all of this. Thank you very much.
It's as a journalist, I just want to say how important it is that this is done right. And I understand the pressure from some of our colleagues to get this done quickly, especially in relation to member states where there's obviously real problems. But I think my personal experience as a journalist and I've worked in many newsrooms around the world. Small nuanced changes can have big effects in the way we operate. So yeah, good luck continuing your work on that file. I'll come down to you, Sylvie. Sort of relative as well, the SLAPS proposal. There's just been an agreement between Council and Parliament. What was the S&D pressing for? What does this all mean? And what does it really mean to prevent lawsuits from sort of trying to clamp down on valid reporting?
Merci, Jack. Thank you, Jack. And thank you for inviting me to be part of the panel today. I'm going to be speaking French. Now, I have to say, for the Socialists and Democrats, it was a real opportunity, but also an honour to work on this file and to engage with one of the pillars that underpins our democracy. As you've mentioned this afternoon, it is a fundamental pillar of democracy, the protection of journalism. And in the two files that I dealt with, first was protecting journalists around the world, and then the second one that we're talking about today on the anti-SLAPS directive. Now, just let me explain what a SLAP is, for those who aren't overly familiar with the term. It's a strategic lawsuit against public participation. And what it means is those lawsuits that are basically cases against individuals that are designed to silence journalism and reporting, investigation and public protest on issues that are of interest to all of us. That might be climate change, it might be public health, labour rights or even consumer rights. And these slaps are a tool used by often very powerful organizations, sometimes by politicians, by multinational companies. And their clear aim is to take out of the critical public eye certain measures that are being investigated. Now, we don't think that there is any desire to have justice, to win in front of a court, but really to create fear, to silence, and to exhaust the resources of those who don't dare to raise their heads in opposition. So I would say that this does represent a threat to our democracy. It represents a threat to the rule of law. It's not necessarily that the problem is the judges, but this has an impact on the freedom of expression, the freedom of association, the freedom of information, which are fundamental rights. Let me remind you, Daphne Caruana Galizia was the subject of 43 slaps at the time of her murder. So the S&D group has been sounding the alarm for many years about the exponential growth of these lawsuits, which hit a record high in 2022. In the light of this threat, we felt that a rapid response was needed in order to protect those who are most vulnerable and to avoid powerful individuals and companies from using these tactics. The directive presented by the Commission in April 2022 was a follow-up to an own initiative report from the European Parliament, which is adopted in November 2021, and the proposal constitutes an instrument which is designed to help defendants when they are involved in the process of establishing bail and other kinds of guarantees in these lawsuits. Now, the primary rapporteur was my colleague Tim Vulcan, who reported for the jury committee, and his report was adopted with a huge majority, with 564 votes in favour. The only people who opposed the report were the ECR and the ID, which won't surprise anyone. So really, once you're talking about over 500 votes, you've got a basis for making these fairly ambitious proposals, although we did anticipate difficult conversations with the Council because they were seeking to water down the Commission proposal. So, you know, it was very stereotypical, but that was basically the situation. So overnight, between the 29th and the 30th of November, a provisional political agreement was reached, and many of the ambitious Parliament proposals are contained in the mandate. So we are going to maintain the definition of cross-border cases as proposed by the Commission. The Council was in favour of removing that article. There is a new article which has a requirement that for two guarantees, so the throwing out of cases that are clearly unfounded and the creation of a financial guarantee by the judge for those individuals who don't have suitable resources. There are two new articles on support measures, so assistance, information, transparency and collection of data. And there's also the provision of legal and financial assistance, and there's also psychological support through a single national contact point. There is a guarantee of the involvement of third parties such as trade unions, NGOs and other parties with a legitimate interest in supporting the defendants. Then there's the question of the expenses. The defendants will be refunded any costs incurred in the course of their defence, and they will also have the right to a payment for damages. So it's a very ambitious text, but it's very necessary. It's going to protect the victims, but also by extension will protect the rule of law and the freedom of expression in our countries. Thank you.
Thanks, Sylvie. Really interesting. It's such a complicated thing to work around, and there's been so much progression on it. It's a strange one. A slap is oftentimes for a journalist seen as a bit of a badge of honor. I'm getting to the right thing, and then it's a complete nightmare to deal with. So it's really important that they're prevented. Okay, Iban, let's come to you, because we're moving forward technologically. The media world has changed so much and changing every single day. I know that you work a lot on the metaverse, which is something that is going to be very complicated to police or to make sure is done correctly in a fair way for freedom of expression. How are we going to make sure that all of these new areas, AI, metaverse, the ever deepening online digital space that we live in, are going to hold space for free expression?
Thank you, Mark. I don't know how much time we have to respond your question. How many days, I mean. But I try to comprehend everything. And first remark about my competence on that report. In fact, I'm the co-reporter, not the shadow reporter. I'm shadow reporting Artificial Intelligence Act. By the way, we are in an ongoing negotiation right now. I'm in the part that is not under my umbrella competency by jury, but I'll incorporate myself to this team. And I have to say, first of all, that things are tough. I'm hopeful about the final outcome, but I'm not sure what is going to happen. And then I'm going to change to Spanish, if you don't mind. Y quiero, por supuesto, en primer lugar, dar...
I would like to start, of course, by thanking you for inviting me to speak here, and to say thank you to all those people who are listening to this conference. Now, I'm going to talk about geo-blocking first. I think there's a real risk to the sector and the continuity of the sector, and I hope that we will be capable amongst MEPs to resolve this, because I think if we can't bring this file forward, it won't just be long-term issues, we'll even have short-term problems and continuity issues here in Europe. But I'll come back to the question that you asked more specifically. So there's a lot of different projects that are ongoing at the moment. There are more than 100 pieces of legislation, directives that are being negotiated together with Council. And we in the S&D, we're very aware of the growing challenges being posed by digitalization for the creative sector, for media, for communication sector. So this is all very important. Europe wants to be a pioneer. It wants to be a leader right across the board in this area when tackling all these new challenges posed by digitalization, but at the same time respecting our principles and our values as enshrined in the treaties and also the European Charter of Fundamental Rights. It's important amongst these different values to look in particular at the value of cultural diversity. Now, we don't have a huge amount of raw materials in Europe, but we do have culture, we have creators, we have creativity, we're real cultural creators, and that's one of the sources of richness that we have here in Europe. So it's very important that we want to protect that creativity. Digitalization has changed the way that audiences access material, so we have to think about the visibility, the content, and how the income is divided when we look at these digital platforms. In the report on cultural diversity and the conditions for authors in the market of online music and streaming was adopted in the Culture Commission last week by a broad majority. So thank you to all the colleagues who helped with that. There are a lot of challenges that have come from digitalization for the music sector. So we would like to see more transparency when it comes to the use of algorithms in the cultural sector, how they use the type of data they collect, how the criteria is applied, and the content recommendations. We want to ensure that cultural diversity is protected by making sure we have a space for minority languages, and also to think about how to distribute the benefits, the profits from digital music. It's important that the authors, those content creators, those involved in the work are getting a fair wage. So we need to make sure that artists are getting fair profits. These aren't just nice words, but we have this enshrined in the law. We also have the issue of artificial intelligence and the ethical use of artificial intelligence. We have seen a big development of generative artificial intelligence, and this can really affect the veracity and confidence that people have in information. So the European AI law is a real framework proposal that takes up these different technologies and artificial intelligence, and the use in the European Union. So protecting democracy and the rule of law and protecting the environment are all amongst our major aims. And we want to have a risk-based approach for this legislation as well. The use of artificial intelligence in sensitive sectors such as education will be considered high risk and will have strict obligations when it comes to transparency, human monitoring, cybersecurity, non-discrimination of data that is used. There will be a high-risk list put forward by Parliament, which includes algorithms used by large platforms to tackle disinformation, and that goes together with the Media Freedom Act. We need to make sure that this is in line with the obligations established by the Digital Services Act and also the future Media Freedom Act. Linked to the issue of generative AI, there are also certain obligations in our AI law to ensure that content created or generated by artificial intelligence respects fundamental rights, protects copyright, protects the data of the authors that's being used by these AI systems. We also want to strengthen transparency in relation to deep fake or other content produced by AI. We are calling for transparency when it comes to the transmission of images, audio material, video, text, anything that is generated by artificial intelligence, so consumers have that information. In the case of communication media, this is very important to protect the work of journalists and to make sure that there is trust that AI is being used in the right way, because if it's used in the right way, it can be a help together with human monitoring to have that editorial responsibility. This law is currently being negotiated, and having these laws to regulate these functional models is very important, but it's a source of friction between Parliament and Council. Parliament believes it's very important to have these types of obligations included. To conclude, having the right media education and digital literacy is something that we consider to be key. Having equal access to a quality education so that you have the necessary tools to fully participate in the digital aspects of our society is going to be a keystone to future democracy in a digital age. We have taken some steps in this direction already. The law on media freedom, as my colleague Petra talked about, the law on artificial intelligence, which we are currently negotiating, and we hope that we can conclude that in the trilogue today. Thank you very much.
Yeah, so much work going on that. It's such a sort of hot topic at the moment, obviously. Really interesting and really fundamental. And the truth is it's new ground. And we need to work out what we're going to do about this. There's no correct answer necessarily immediately, but we need to get something right and keep it flexible, I think. Herod, it's wonderful that you're here with us. Thanks so much for joining us. You're from the Foundation for European Progressive Studies. I know you've written a lot about the digital transition. You've looked into what this means. What do you think the priorities for the next mandate of the EU are to protect journalists, to keep media open? I know that you've got a lot of thoughts on a lot of these different issues.
Maybe to start first, so my research field is the digital. So
Yeah, exactly.
less media, but so I'm not the knowledge, like I'm not a media scientist, but more on the digital transition. And we all know this fourth industrial revolution, AI is one part of it. We're talking about the metaverse. It's less of a hype now than it was a couple of years ago. So these things come and go. But what is clear is that this self-driving process of the digital transition, it's going faster and faster. And especially if you look in like decades, you know, we don't know yet where we will be in 5 years or where we will be in 10 years if this continues. And this impacts media. And to look a bit at the broader picture, when I think about media, a big dynamic that has changed economically is that right now advertisement is going more to big tech firms than to media traditionally. So in the end, it's the economic dynamics at play that is weakening as well European media, also the position of journalists. So the profession, the value they can create for themselves, and also the wages perhaps, and the situation, the quality of the media through that, because there's less money to do the work. But also they are weakened in a sense. The value of a company goes down, so it's easier to buy it. So this dynamic is in play, and we know the situations, like Petra also said, like the usual suspect, like Hungary and Poland, but it's in more countries, and I'm from the Netherlands myself, but in my country, half of the newspapers are owned by one company, and it's also actually owning a big part of the newspapers here in Belgium, in Flanders. So this DPG is called, the persgroep. It's many newspapers under one ownership. It doesn't say that the journalists are not doing their right job. So there's independence of the redactions. There's different brands that are left-leaning, centrist. Like there's all this history, but is it right? You know, if this is all concentrated, and there's the dynamic behind. The revenue is just less, and it's going to U.S. firms. If I then turn to the public, because that's the thing that we haven't really discussed, the public service media. Because there is, I think, an important role when we talk about media freedom, but also about the democratic impact. Petra, you really started with this importance for the democracy. There's a reason why we have this sector actually in every EU country we have it in different forms and sorts. But all of these public service media, they shied away from the digital realm because they are state-owned, or state-owned not always, but at least state-funded, so it's public money. And to compete in the digital market, it's difficult. It was always not even possible, or difficult, potentially difficult. So they missed the boat when it comes to digitalization. And what you see now, there was actually a Eurobarometer of the European Parliament of last month. At this point, still, most of the citizens, so 71% in Europe, get their news through the television. So television is still the most important. But already 42% gets it on online press, and another 37% gets it from social media news. And this is, and it's changing. It's growing. The online part is growing quickly. So the question is, how will this develop? Especially if you look at differences between countries, but also difference between age groups. You would see that young audiences would get more. They would less television, more other sources. Well, our public service media, they're strong on television, and less so on the others. And if they play in this digital field, their content, so it's created with public money, it's on the private platforms. So they are actually supporting the private companies that making money out of our data, but also out of advertisements. So this is a dynamic that we need to look in, and then the threats of fake news and disinformation. We all know that this is having an impact. That's also why we have for example, the political agreement that's now reached also on the political ads, the political advertisement online. But the question is this going to be enough to be transparent about who's behind an ad? And I'm not saying that this was a bad job, because we're trying, at least we're regulating here in Europe. It's also a strong point of the EU that we are regulating big tech. But is it going to be enough if you know that this targeted advertisement, if you have cutting edge psychological behavioral marketing with micro-targeting and maybe AI coming our way? So AI is making it easier to create very specific content and to make it very easy to scale like different messages. We might get a mix also even now for the European election that's upcoming. there might be a mix where this influence is shown and the extremes are winning out. So we have the extreme right winning the election in the Netherlands. We have Finland. There's more at play than this, but it's definitely the digital is a part of this problem when you think about the healthiness of our democracy and the healthiness of our media. But what is then the solution? So that's where we as FEPS also are interested to look into it. And for us, it's very clear, and it's not just us, but also some researchers. These platforms that are now being used, where the content is being displaced, it's actually more infrastructure. Isn't this public digital infrastructure? Or should there be at least a public digital alternative for these infrastructures? Because why do we have to put our public media on YouTube? Well, there could also be a public platform where they share it, where there is different kind of algorithms, different kind of way of suing, where there's trustworthiness. So there is like this avenue for us to look into, I think, as social democrats, for public digital infrastructure investments. It's on many fields. You can also have the same discussion about education, about healthcare, about the green transition. There's on many levels, and also like not only in applications, but also on cloud for AI, for example. Like all this infrastructure, the digital has many different aspects. But on media, I think there is a discussion to be had. And you see initiatives already. So there's now a small project also funded by the European Commission it's called the EU-funded Council for European Public Space. They have a platform that will go live in a few days. I saw online, I checked it out now, like display.eu, and it's for content. It's a content platform from different EU countries. You had the EBU, so the European Broadcasting Union, also doing a project on sharing pan-European automatic translation. There's opportunities to make media interesting for different countries. They are happening, but they're not scaled yet. And I think for the next European Commission, it would be interesting to look into this and to do this properly funded. Because in the end, if you look at a broadcaster, they cannot compete on the technical level with Netflix and YouTube. On a European level, also with the audience, because they have the reach, they have the audience, they could, but it takes money and it takes good programmers, and just one broadcaster can do it. So.
Yeah. Thank you, Gerard. Yeah, it's really interesting, and it's that complex thing. Working in many broadcasters, we need to tailor to YouTube, tailor to TV, tailor to Instagram. There's so much pressure on us to try and do it. The technology helps us as well to do those things, but it's difficult to know where we're going to go. Please. Yeah.
Ich würde gerne einen Satz zu dem letzten Projekt sagen.
I'd quite like just to say one point on the last project, the pilot project that was mentioned. I don't think that's something that is financed by the European Commission. I'm always quite sensitive to that. It is the European Budget Authority, so Parliament and Council. So just to be clear on that point. So it's a pilot project that we, as the European Parliament, the Culture Committee, got started to have that European area. Now, I know this can't really be combined compared to Netflix, but it's something new, something that's been started from the European budget rather than the European Commission.
Okay, let's take a couple. We are so low on time that I want to take a couple of questions. If anyone has one, raise your hand, please.
Hi, I am Chiara. I am an intern at the International Federation of Journalists, and I wanted to ask a question regarding AI. So recent researches have shown that actually media outlets, readers want to have media outlets label when they use AI content, generated content, but then they trust less media when media outlets do so. So my question is, how can we have readers actually still trust the media that use AI? And also, how can we ensure that media outlets are using AI in the right way? Because it can be a source of implementing good media and good creative content, of course, but at the same time, it can be a little bit risky, and it can eliminate the job of journalists straight away. So how can we do that?
It's a good question. I sit in so many meetings about this stuff all the time. Please, one more question here.
So I just wanted, so my name is Marja Katalinic. I'm from European Cultural Foundation. I'm a project coordinator of Display Europe. So I just want to say thank you for raising this project, because it really is kind of a hard work, but very committed. So if anybody's interested, I'm very happy to relay more information. Thank you.
Okay, thanks so much. Perhaps, Ivan, this feels like you on the AI topic. Perhaps you'd like to come in.
I'm going to respond in Spanish because even in Spanish, I think that I'm not able to respond to you, but at least I'm more comfortable.
So what you say is quite right. And the question is an affirmation, really. It's true that the gradual substitution of AI generated work rather than journalists' output, that volume is growing, and that is resulting in a deterioration of the quality of the news. I think it's quite apparent if you look at the difference in quality between AI-generated output and work written by journalists. But with each interaction, of course, there will be improvements. But at the moment, I think it's not going to be possible to maintain a minimum quality standard using AI. But it might be that there are some media who've decided that they don't care about the quality, they just want to keep on updating their front page because they get more automated advertising. So the importance is to have this rolling news and keep on generating content. Now, when you have AI-generated content, it's really important that there is a label so that we know that we are engaging with AI rather than a journalist. And I have to say that the pressure to get rid of that provision suggested by the Parliament, the pressure is huge. And I have to say, I'm not quite sure what's going to happen to the text. But certainly for audio and voice recording, there will be a label. There is a consensus that there could be a systemic risk if we fail to label those. But the danger is that it won't be applied to text. I realise we're short, but let me just say that there's one thing that I keep on hearing. In Spain, there's work going on through traditional media, comms. They talk about sustainability, and I like that. It's having the environmental idea applied to democratic values. So journalism is essential if democracy is to continue. It has a public role, and therefore we need to find a way to sustain media financially, because at the moment they're not economically viable. So that means that we're going to have to take a decision as a society to say we need to make sure that these media operations can continue to work. And I think the sector is going to have to help with that. It's not going to be the public sector that does it.
One sentence on this quickly before we wrap the panel up.
Also ich glaube, was die Nutzung von KI im Journalismus
I think when it comes to using AI in journalism, it's very important to be transparent, to say when you're using it and always have a human to check it over. So there's a human editorial responsibility. And thirdly, there's a certain journalistic ethos to continue good journalistic training and education. I think that's very important when it comes to using AI in journalism.
Thank you very much. Okay, a huge round of applause for our third panel. Thank you so much. I'll ask you to leave the stage because we're just going to have, just before we get into our networking drink, we're going to hear from Alex Aguirre-Saliba once more, just to wrap up our event. Who's just going to come up to the stage and make a few final words. We've got a few minutes for a quick networking drink. It might be a bit of a speed dating networking. but definitely use this opportunity to talk to some of the people that have spoken. Alex, give us your final words.
Dear participants, dear colleagues, first of all, thanks for your for this very constructive event. Thanks to all the people who were here with us today, participating, both in person and also online, and also the representatives of the civil society that were with us. Solidar Secretary General Michael, thank you. Culture Action Europe Secretary General Lars Elbert, thank you. And also Gerard Rice Osterwick from FEPS, the Foundation for Progressive Studies, and all our SND cult MEPs present here today and who were also part of different sessions. We had 3 very interesting panels for a quality education for all, the second one towards a Europe for culture, and also the third panel, media freedom in a digital world. I want to share some thoughts to take stock of today's very fruitful discussions. First of all, the socio-economic, cultural, digital, and also technological transformations are changing our lives and transforming our citizens' approach when it comes to art and also culture. On the one hand, these changes are empowering people to enjoy more comprehensive access to knowledge and also different ways to access content, create, and also participate even more than before. On the other hand, however, we are assisting a decrease in confidence of younger generation in both education and also culture as a vehicle for quality employment and also as a vehicle for empowerment. We want to address the challenges ahead of us. We want to embrace the opportunities that those challenges can bring to us. We want to shape a more inclusive future European society actively. Only universal access to quality and inclusive education systems from an early age with a lifelong learning approach can reduce and also prevent inequalities, social discrimination, poverty, promoting at the same time human dignity, personal and social development, quality, employability, and true European citizenship. Only education can fight fake news and hate speech, the spread of misinformation in media and internet, populism, and also dangerous nationalism. Education is an investment. Education is not a cost. We need to continue playing an active role, all of us, in developing an effective European education area to promote equal opportunities and social inclusion through the convergence of national education systems. We should provide solid foundations for the functioning of our societies. We should encourage and also imagine the future revision of treaties, which must grant EU more broader competencies in both education and also culture. Crucial is that of fostering mobility, ensure automatic mutual recognition of diplomas and also outcomes of learning, periods abroad, a shared sense of belonging to Europe, and also better employability. Crucial, it is to find a way to recognize formal and non-formal experiences. It is crucial to invest in people, to invest in youth. People are and must remain at the center as our priority. And education is a precondition for people's development and also social inclusiveness. Investing in people means investing in their education, investing in their skills, investing in their competences. Investing in people means investing in vocational education and training, investing in training for teachers, investing in facing the shortages of teachers that nearly all member states are facing. It means increasing active citizenship in policymaking and democratic rights. This is even more important within the context of this year's EP elections, which are approaching. Younger people must be further involved in their communities and democracy at all levels, from local to national to European. EU youth tests should be introduced to ensure that young people are considered when the EU is deciding on new policies, when the EU is deciding on new laws. Investing in people also means ensuring paid and equal traineeship and also valorizing better youth volunteers. It means better addressing youth health policies, including mental health, which is so pressing at this juncture. Investing in people also requires to invest in connectivity for all, ensuring an increased participation of women and girls in both science and technology. Digital education needs to be enhanced. The lack of digital employment, equipment, and connectivity in schools across member states has a detrimental effect on our students' skills and education. Digital education is also a way to ensure accessibility to the most disadvantaged, to the most vulnerable in our societies. In this context, we need to ensure a more focus on using EU financing. Only a small number of schools have fast connections that make the best of the potential of digital education. We need to promote EU actions more actively and strengthen in cooperation with member states the link between EU objectives, national and regional strategies for digitalization of schools, and EU funding for schools. Dear participants, dear all, investing in education, knowledge and culture is the only way to build bridges through mutual understanding, knocking down walls of indifference and preventing conflicts. The EU programme should receive increased financial support. We should work to secure an ambitious budget for education and culture with specific measures aimed at addressing anti-discrimination to ensure a greener transition in the next MFF. The EP will have a role to play during the MFF before 2028. Flagship programs such as Erasmus+, the European Solidarity Corps, Creative Europe, and citizen equality rights and values require specific attention. As emerged during the second panel, cultural diversity is a prerequisite. Culture is a driver for sustainable growth. Culture, creative, and artistic expressions are intrinsic value, an exercise of freedom, an exercise of diversity. But culture, creativity, and artistic expressions also have a strategic, socio-economic importance if we consider that culture and creative industries' capacity to provide jobs. However, culture and creative professionals frequently lack the financial and employment security and experience unstable income. National differences in administrative procedures and also in definitions of their work and status can hinder the cross-border activities and mobility per se. We succeeded in adopting an important report asking a legislative framework on the status of artists. It is now crucial that the outgoing Spanish and the incoming Belgian presidency push for the European Commission to take action as soon as possible. Dear participants, dear all, the third panel, Media Freedom in a Digital World, addressed crucial fundamental rights. Media freedom and pluralism are enshrined under Article 11 of the EU Charter of Fundamental Rights as protecting freedom of expression, as protecting information. However, media freedom and editorial independence have seriously deteriorated in the EU in the recent years, and concentrations in the European media market should not mean less diversity of media outlets and contents for all of us to enjoy. One of the techniques used to harass and silence journalists, human rights defenders, and also activists is to use groundless or abusive lawsuits to silence them when they are only using their political rights and freedom of expression and information to address matters of public interests. It took us years to react at European level, but we finally got there with the Anti-SLAPS Directive. We secured the possible participation in the proceedings of NGOs, trade unions, and other parties with legitimate interest in support of defendants. We introduced measures regarding legal, psychological, and also financial assistance through a single point of contact at national level to those that are victims of SLAPS. We ensured a comprehensive understanding of what matters with cross-border implications would cover, looking at the means through which the act of public participation is accessible. And we insisted that defendants are fully reimbursed and strong penalties are paid by the plaintiff in every case that is found to be unfounded, that is found to be abusive. But this is not the end of it. This is only the beginning. As we are now working hard to achieve a crucial piece of law to protect media freedom in Europe, because information is a public good, because media are essential to inform, shape opinions, foster debate and reflections. Journalists, editors, and media service providers are constantly under pressure, political as well as economic. For us, SND, it is crucial to ensure media's full editorial independence, the strongest safeguards to protect journalist sources against undue surveillance and arguments of national security may not be used by governments to bypass this protection. We want everyone, you and me, can check at any time who is owning a media outlet and how it is being financed. We want a fully independent and deceitful oversight structure and not allow any censorship by very large online platforms regarding the media content that they want or do not want to be displayed on their platforms. And we count very much on the Council to speak the same language and make this happen. In the context, we also ensure cultural freedom in the digital world, the safe, the critical, and responsible use of digital technology with, as rightly pointed out in the last debate, with a human-centered perspective that is essential for informed democratic investment and learning processes. The evolution of artificial intelligence with its risks and opportunities also underlines the fundamental role of those factors in combating stereotypes, debunking misinformation, and ensuring cultural diversity. Dear participants, I want to conclude our conference today by asking for your support. Asking for your support, first of all, for a society based on social inclusion and intercultural understanding, making the principles and values of cultural democracy a reality for all our citizens, and bringing Europe closer to our citizens and citizens closer to Europe. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Alex. Yeah. A huge thanks for hosting us here today. The guys are telling us, look, that it's right out of time. I've run it down.